All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the April 16th session. It's our program meeting for the Licking County Computer Society, and we have a special guest speaker with us this week. His name is Mark Schulman. He is a Central Florida Computer Society member, author, speaker, web designer, teacher, software designer, technology enthusiast. He has designed software and web applications for businesses from small medical practices to Fortune 500 companies. In addition, Mark speaks on a wide variety of technological issues, one of which we're about to hear about. He is the author of 7 computer books, including Using Unix, Understanding Unix, and Using Lotus Notes, all published by Q, a division of Macmillan McGraw-Hill. He has taught a wide range of programming courses for major corporations and worked on large software development projects. Mark currently manages the IT department for a small company that does clinical drug trials and computers for a small medical practice. His major geek interest these days is the computing technology that made moon landings possible in the 1960s. He's currently working on building a reproduction of the Apollo guidance computer. Welcome, Mark. We're glad to have you, and thank you for being here.
Thanks, Adam. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Our topic today is encryption. So let's dive right into that. Let me share my screen. All right. Can you see my screen?
I can.
All right.
Yep.
Well, if John can see it, that's all we need. So we'll go for that. Okay. So Adam told you a little bit about me. I've been doing some form of IT for almost 45 years now. One of the important things that I want to mention before we get started, we're going to talk about a lot of different software products as we go through this presentation. And I want you to know that I don't have any affiliation with any of these products. I don't work for any of these companies. I don't know anybody at any of these companies. This is just software that I've used over the years and I really like. And as far as I can remember off the top of my head, everything I'm going to recommend is free. So that's a bonus. So during this presentation, we're going to talk about 4 different topics: single file encryption, encrypted containers, whole disk encryption, and a bunch of miscellaneous topics after that. If you don't know what any of these are right now, don't worry about it. We'll talk about it. So first question is, what is encryption? It's scrambling information so that it can't be read by unauthorized people. And these days, when we talk about computers, what we're talking about is taking the data, running it through some standard algorithm so that it gets converted into what looks like just a jumbled mess of information. And then the person who is supposed to see that information can take it and do the reverse process on it so that it gets back to its original form. And even if you don't know anything about encryption and you didn't know you used it, you actually do. And there's 2 really common places with computers that we use it all the time. The first is in a web browser. Anytime you access a website that starts with HTTPS, which is most of them these days, you get the little padlock symbol on the browser. And what that tells you is that when information leaves your browser, it's encrypted so that if somebody is snooping on the internet and tries to intercept what you're doing, they're not going to be able to see any of the information you're sending or receiving. So that's really important when we're doing things like banking on the internet. And the other place it gets used is with Wi-Fi these days, and we use this almost any time we make a Wi-Fi connection. Over on the right-hand side of this screen is a screenshot that shows the wireless access points that are available to me. And you see that there's a little, it's hard to tell in this image, but there's a little padlock next to most of them. And that indicates that if I connect to that hotspot, I've got to enter a password, and everything that goes over that hotspot is going to be encrypted, and somebody snooping won't be able to see what I'm doing. So we're going to talk about private data and how to keep it that way. And there could be lots of reasons that you really care about keeping data private. Perhaps you don't want your roommate snooping through your PC when you're not home, and you want to be sure that even if they can get at the information on your PC, it's not going to do them any good. You might have a flash drive on which you store passwords for your social media accounts or other sensitive information. And if you lose that flash drive, you wouldn't want that information getting out. This is something that I run into all the time, and we'll talk more about this in just a second. But I've got a flash drive that I use at work, and it's got information on it that either contains patient information, and as Adam said, I work in a medical office, and either contains patient information or contains passwords that could be used to access patient information. And boy, one of the things you do not want to do is lose or release patient information. The legal hoops we've got to jump through if any of that information gets out is really onerous. And so we're really, really careful about this. Another example, and this comes up all the time, is you want to email information, and most email is not secure. You would be surprised where your email travels on the internet and who could get access to it. This doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. And email is not normally encrypted. It's not protected in any way. And so unless you subscribe to a service that provides this for you, your information is vulnerable when you email. So you want to send, we run into this, we're running into it right now. We want to send information to our tax accountant. And if we email it, it's wide open. So email is a real problem. We'll talk more about that in just a second. I want to be clear that what we're going to be talking about in here is mostly what I refer to as casual encryption, which is to say that I've got information and I don't want it to get out, but I don't know that the ramifications of it getting out would be terribly dire. If someone intercepts one of my emails and manages to read some information that I consider to be private, nobody's going to die from it. And there's not going to be any spies in foreign countries shot over it. Nobody's going to get arrested because of it. So I consider that just, I'm protecting my privacy, and that's casual encryption. There is another level of encryption that you might call critical encryption, where people could die if this information gets out. So if you're emailing freedom fighters in some foreign country and trying to provide them information that's crucial to the revolution, then some of that information is lists of people or plans for an attack on some oppressive regime, then people could die if that information gets released. So I just want to make it clear we're mostly talking about the former case, the casual encryption. Okay, the first topic we're going to talk about is is single file encryption. So this is situations where I've got a single file and I need to make sure that nobody can read it if they don't have the proper password. So there's a single file we want to encrypt, and you use this when you want to encrypt a single file for yourself or for someone else. So it can be either to protect information that only you want to be able to see, or if you want to share a file with somebody, but you want to make sure that only you and the other person can see it. So some examples of why you might want to do this. A flash drive contains a list of lock combinations that you use at work. Or you want to email a tax return to your accountant, and you want to make sure that nobody who intercepts the email can read that information. So there's a lot of programs that can do this. Literally hundreds and hundreds of programs that can do this. So some that I'm going to talk about here is, first of all, Microsoft Office actually has encryption built in, and a lot of people don't know this. So if you're going to share, if you want to keep a Microsoft Office document, a Word document, an Excel spreadsheet private, you can do that with the built-in encryption. I frequently use a program called 7-Zip, which gets used for a lot of other things, but one of the good things it can be used for is encryption. The other program I use is called AES Crypt, and I'm going to demonstrate that one for you. And again, there are many more. So if you've got one that you particularly like that does the same thing, that's fine. These are just two that I've discovered that I happen to use. 7-zip is very widely used. And a lot of people use that one. So let me show you what that might look like to do single file encryption. Now, the first one I'm going to show you is Microsoft Office, because a lot of the things that you're going to want to trade with other people are likely to be Word documents or Excel spreadsheets. So let's see an example of that. So I've got a folder open on my PC that contains a lot of personal information. So I've got information about my business. I've got just general data. I've got music, photos, projects, and things that I want to study. I always like reading new things, learning new things. So I've got a study directory. We'll look at that in a minute. So let's suppose if I go into the business folder here, I've got an Excel spreadsheet, and some of you who are in the room may not be able to see this, but it's called Weekly Rolling Cash Flow. And I want to be able to send that to my accountant, and I want to be able to encrypt it. So I'm going to open that spreadsheet. Okay, there it is. And so I want to put a password on it and encrypt it. So the way I do that, I'm going to go to File, Info, Protect Workbook, and Encrypt with Password. And by the way, you can take notes if you want, obviously, but I send a copy of the slides to John, and he'll post these or distribute them to whoever wants them. So everything I'm showing you in here is going to be on the slides as well, and you'll get a copy of those if you want it. So it's asking me for a password for this file, and I'll type a password. And then it asks for me for the same password again, just to be sure I didn't mistype it. And then the background here on this item goes to yellow, and that means it's now protected with a password. So I'm going to exit and save it. And nothing appeared to change, but if I try to open it again, before it will show it to me, it prompts me for a password. And if I don't know that password, it won't open it. And there it is. So as long as I enter the password, I can get to it just as I always could. But without the password, I'll never be able to see any of the information in it. So I could now email that to my accountant and give my accountant the password, and he or she would be able to open that with no problem, as long as they have a later version of Excel, just like I do. So that'll work for any Microsoft Office document. Works for Word, Publisher, Excel, any of the Microsoft documents that'll work for. But what if it's some other kind of file? So I'm going to go into my study directory, and I've got a folder here called Mountain Climbing. I love reading about mountain climbing. I love stories about mountain climbing. I have absolutely no desire to actually do it, but I love reading about other people doing it. So I've got a PDF here called Everest 2023 Guide. And if I open it, it's just information about climbing Mount Everest in 2023. Now, there's not any information in here that I'd really consider to be private. Suppose I wanted to encrypt it and send it to somebody else, and I didn't want anybody else reading it. So I've got a piece of software installed on my PC called AES Crypt. And once I install it, if I right-click on this file, there's an item here in the menu, in the right-click menu, that says AES Encrypt. And if I click that, it prompts me for a password twice. It wants the same password. And I'll type a password twice. And what happens is it created another file with the same name. It's called Everest 2023 Guide.pdf, but then it's got a .aes on the end. And it's the same size, or almost the same size. It's actually a tiny bit bigger. And it contains the same information, but it's encrypted. So I could send that to somebody and nobody would be able to read it except them. Now, what's going to happen, I'm going to copy that file someplace else so I can show you what happens when they get that file. So let's say they receive that file. If they double click on it, it's going to prompt them for a password. And as long as they know the password and enter the password, they get a new version of the file, which is not encrypted. And they'll be able to open that just as I could before I encrypted it. So AES Encrypt creates a copy of the file that's encrypted that you can send. And when that person gets the file, they can double click on it and they can get back to the original unencrypted file. Now, in order for that to work, they have to have AES Encrypt installed on their computer. So you have to have an arrangement with that person ahead of time that you're both going to use that software. And that's pretty much true of all the encryption software. That if you use it to share files with other people, then everybody's got to have the same software. Okay, any questions on that? Okay. Now, a couple tips about this. When you're encrypting a file, you need to be careful that you don't give away too much in the file name. So suppose, for example, I'm dissatisfied with my job and I'm on my work computer and I want to create a list of to-do items to search for a new job. And since I don't want my boss seeing that to-do list, I encrypt it. So I put it in a Word document and I use the word encryption feature to make sure that nobody can see it. And that way I know my boss can't look through it. But I stupidly give the file a name like job search to-do list. Well, he may not be able to look at the information in the file, but just looking at the name of the file gives him an inkling that I'm looking for a new job. So a better thing to do would be to have just given this file a name of something like to-do list or personal to-do list. And that way, as long as it's encrypted, you can't tell from the file name what it is. And as long as it's encrypted, nobody would be able to look inside of it. The other thing to be careful about, and I've seen people do this. So let's say you encrypt a file and you want to mail it to somebody. And I've seen people actually do this. So look at this email. It says, "Dear Pete, a list of phone numbers is attached. The file is encrypted. The password is call me soon, !" Well, don't do that. Don't give them the password in the email so that if somebody intercepts this email, they've got the file and they've got the password for it. So the rule for exchanging passwords is give the person the password some other way than however you're delivering the file. So if you're giving them a file on a flash drive, then just tell them the password. Or write it down on a slip of paper and give that to them separately. Or if you're emailing them the file, then text them the password or give them a phone call and give them the password. But you want to make sure that if somebody is snooping on your emails or snooping on your text messages, that they're not going to get both the password and the data. So they would have to completely tap their phone, intercept all their text messages and get their emails in order to get both the data and the password. Okay, so that's a single file. The next thing I want to talk about is encrypted containers. And I use these all the time. I use this frequently at work. So what an encrypted container allows you to do is to create an area of your disk where everything in that area is encrypted. So you can copy files there, you can store whatever you want in there, and anything in that encrypted container is encrypted. And in order to get to it, you have to know the proper password. One of the places this comes in really handy, and this is where I use it a lot, is with flash drives and external hard drives. So I mentioned that I've got a flash drive at work that I use for my work, and I have to be really careful that if I lose that flash drive, people are not going to be able to get at patient information. So what I did on that flash drive was create an encrypted container. And if I want to store files on that flash drive, I put it in the encrypted container. And then I know that if somebody finds that flash drive, they're not going to be able to get at any of the information if they don't know the password. So it creates an encrypted area and automatically encrypts or decrypts files as needed. So when you put files into it, they get encrypted. When you take files out of it, they get decrypted. And my favorite program for doing this, and there are several ways to do this, but my favorite program is called VeriCrypt. It's based on an older, similar program called TrueCrypt. And TrueCrypt was around in the early 2000s, but they went out of business. That's not exactly what happened, but they went out of business, and a company called Idris took over the code and created VeriCrypt from it. It's free, it's really easy to use, and it's available for Windows, Mac, and Linux. And I'll give you some examples where we use this at work, some real life examples. And hopefully you'll see how useful it is. So how does this work? Well, in order to use VeriCrypt, the first thing you have to do with VeriCrypt is create a container. Then you, to put stuff in the container, you do what's called mounting the container. And again, I'll show you how to do that. And once it's mounted, you can put files in it, take files out of it, all you want. And when you're done with it, you unmount it, and now nobody can get at it if they don't have the password. Encryption and decryption happens automatically. And let me show you how this works. And again, I find this really, really useful. All right, so I've got a flash drive plugged in here. And it's on my G drive. So this is my G drive. There's already some files on it, but that's fine. And this is my flash drive. So what I want to do is create an encrypted container on that flash drive. Now, if I look at my computer, I've got 71 gigabytes free. So I got lots of space. I'm not going to use anywhere near that. And I'm going to start off by running VeriCrypt. So to create the container, and I only have to do this part once on the flash drive, I'm going to click the button that says create volume. And it asks me what kind of volume I want to create. I'm not going to go into these other things, but the default is exactly what I want. I want to create an encrypted file container. And again, it asks me, do you want to create a standard volume or a hidden volume? Hidden volumes is another topic for another day. I'm going to skip that and just leave it again, leave it the way it comes up. And then it says, okay, where do you want to put it? I want to put it on my flash drive, on my G drive, and I'm going to call it my private stuff, just like that. It then asks me for some encryption options. You don't have to mess with any of this. If you're really an encryption expert, there might be some choices here you'd want to make, but just leave everything the way it comes up and click next. Then it says, how big do you want to make it? So of that 71 gigabytes free on that flash drive, how much of it do I want to use for this encrypted container? So I have to have some idea of how many files and how big those files are that I want to store on here. But I've just got a little bit of stuff. Maybe I'll make it 2 gigabytes. So I'll type in a 2 and click gigabytes and next. Okay, what's the password you want to put on it? So I'm going to type my password that I want to use and click next. And it warns me that I didn't pick a very good password. The password I picked was password. So it knows that that's a really bad password, and it just asks, are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, then it asks me for some more information. And again, you can just accept all the defaults, but it wants me to do something really fun here. It wants me to just move the mouse around. And what it's doing is using my mouse movements to generate some random numbers. And you just move your mouse till this bar turns green. And there it is, it's green. So that's all you have to do, and click Format. Okay, so what it's doing now is setting up that encrypted container, and I'll show you what it looks like in just a second. And it's done. So if I look on my flash drive now, you can see that it created a file called My Private Stuff, and the file is 2 gigabytes in size. That's my encrypted container. So how do I use it now that I've created it? Well, I pick a drive letter, anything I want. Let's pick K for no reason in particular. And then I click Select File. And I select my encrypted container. And I click Mount. And it wants a password. And it chugs for a minute. And there we go. So it shows your K drive is connected to that encrypted container, and it's 2 gigabytes in size. Now, if I look in Windows Explorer now, I've got a K drive now. And I don't know if you can see that if you're in the room, but before I just had 3 other drives. Now I've got a K drive. And if I go to my computer, I can see that my K drive's completely empty, and it's got 2 gigabytes of free space. And it looks just like any other drive. It's empty right now. And I'm going to copy some files into it. So I'm going to go to my mark directory on my hard drive. And I'm going to copy the business folder in there. And I'm going to copy the, let's try the data folder. I don't know how big these are. We'll see. Okay. And it copies that in there. Yep, that one's a little bigger. So I treat it just like I would a flash drive or an external drive, just copy stuff in it. But as it copies this information into it, it's encrypting it. So without the password, nobody's going to be able to get at these files. Okay, and let's see, last I'll look in my study directory and I'll copy my mountain climbing folder into it. And there we go. Okay, so I've copied those 3 things into it. And I can access it just like it was a flash drive or it was its own flash drive or external drive. So I can go into mountain climbing and I can open my mountain climbing Word document and it opens just like normal. But what actually happened there is when I double clicked on that, it got decrypted behind my back and opened normally. I can make changes to it. I can save it. I can treat it just like any other, just like any flash drive. But when I'm done with it, I'm going to go into VeriCrypt. I'm going to select it and I'm going to click Dismount. And now if I look in File Explorer, there is no K drive anymore. On my flash drive, there's still that container, the My Private Stuff, but nobody's going to be able to get to it if they don't know the password. Again, when I'm ready to use it again, I just go into VeriCrypt, select a drive, doesn't have to be the same one. I'll select the H drive just to show that I can. Select File, go to my flash drive, select that file again, Mount. It asks for the password. Okay, and now I have an H drive and there's all my data, the same stuff I put in there before. And I can go into these directories and just access the data like I normally would. So as long as the container is mounted, you treat it just like a flash drive or an external drive. You can copy files to it, edit files, whatever you want to do, But when it's not mounted, nobody can get at it if they don't have the password.
Are you asking for questions?
You certainly may.
I got lost at one point when you were telling about putting the information in the encrypted container. And then you put one named this and you put one named mountain climbing. And so, okay, you closed it. We're all sitting here looking at it. And you go have lunch and you come back. How do you remember what all you put in my private stuff?
Okay, so the same way you would remember what you put in a flash drive. So it just looks like when it's mounted, it just looks like a drive on your computer. Just like you have a C drive, and if you put a DVD in, it's your D drive, probably. Okay. So when it's mounted, it has whatever letter you told it to use.
Okay.
And you just go to that letter drive in Explorer. And so if I go to my computer, I've got all my drives, but there's an H drive. And if I go into my H drive, it just looks like any other folder, and I can look at the stuff I put in it.
Understood.
Okay, good question. All right, does that help a little?
Thank you.
Okay, so, and if I look at it now, you remember we made it 2 terabytes in size. If I look at my computer, I can see that it's still got 1.95 gigabytes free out of 2 gigabytes. So there's a lot of information, a lot of space still available in there. This is used when you want to create an area on a flash drive or on an external hard drive or on your own hard drive where you want to be able to put stuff that nobody else can get to. This is, you would never want to email one of these containers, because if you look at it, it's only got a few megabytes of data in it, but the container is 2 gigabytes in size. It would be impossible to email that to somebody. So this is not a technique for sending information to people. It's a way for setting up a space on a flash drive or an external drive or on your hard drive where you can put stuff and it will be encrypted. So what's a real life use for this? So I use this at work every day. So we have a bunch of external hard drives that we back up our medical records onto. And we've got hundreds of gigabytes. The practice I work for has been in business for a couple of decades. And so you can imagine that they've got hundreds of gigabytes of medical records that they have to keep safe. So every night we take a complete copy of those medical records and we copy it over to one of 5 different external hard drives. And then the next day, one of the doctors takes that external hard drive home with him. And the reason we do that is because if the office burns to the ground, we don't want all of our backups and all of our medical records to be lost. When you lose people's medical records, really bad things happen. You can just get sued every which way. So we have to make sure that we have a copy if something happens to the office. So at any given time, there are 3 of these external hard drives that are at the doctor's house. So, but one of the things we worry about, what if he's on his way home and he's got one of these external hard drives in his car and he stops to go into the 7-Eleven, and while he's in the 7-Eleven, somebody breaks into his car and steals that hard drive. You just cannot imagine the world of hurt you're in if that happens, because you have to notify every patient that their private information may have been revealed. So what we did was we created a terabyte encrypted container on each one of these hard drives. And when we do the backup every night, the information is being copied into that encrypted container, so that when the doctor is on his way home, if one of these drives gets stolen, we know that all the information is in that encrypted container not going to have a problem with somebody being able to get at that information. So that's a real life example of this, that real money depends on this stuff working, and I deal with it every day at work. A couple other really cool features of VeraCrypt. I'm not going to show these to you unless somebody particularly wants to see it. It has a feature that enables you to create what's called a traveler flash drive. So the idea is that, let's say you're going to go stay with a relative for a week and you want to put some of your data on a flash drive and you want to put it in a VeraCrypt container, but your friend does not have VeraCrypt on their computer. Well, you could ask them to let you install VeraCrypt on their computer. But what a traveler drive is it actually puts the VeraCrypt software on the flash drive as well, so that when you put the flash drive in their computer, it'll actually run VeraCrypt off the flash drive. So they don't have to have VeraCrypt installed on their computer. It'll just run it off the flash drive. So that's pretty cool. There's something called key files that allows you to not have to remember a password. It just depends on you having a particular file with you. And I'm not going to get into that in detail unless somebody needs to see that. But the idea is you don't have to remember a password. And they have something called hidden containers. What this is meant to do is conceal the fact that you even have any encrypted data. So imagine you're a freedom fighter in some foreign country, and if the police break into your house in the middle of the night and search your computer, it's not good enough that they just can't read your encrypted data. You don't want them to even know you have any encrypted data, because if they think you've got encrypted data and they don't know the password, they'll just beat it out of you. So what a hidden container is meant to do is conceal the fact that there's even a container there. And again, if anybody wants to see that, be glad to demo it. There are flash drives that have encryption built in. And here's an example here. This is a, who makes this? Kingston, a Kingston data traveler. And you can see that the flash drive actually has a little number pad built right into the flash drive. And so there's a pin associated with the flash drive. And so when you put this into the computer, you have to use the little keypad to enter a code. And if you don't, you won't be able to get at the information on it. Okay, so that's pretty cool. But the problem is these are pretty expensive. And an 8 gigabyte flash drive with this keypad on it is about $74 last time checked. Well, a regular 8 gigabyte flash drive should only be about $10. So you're paying a real premium to have this little keypad on it. To me, VeraCrypt is just as good. I know VeraCrypt works. And so this might be a little bit easier because you just have to key in the number and away you go. So with VeraCrypt, you've got to have the software. But I know VeraCrypt works. I know that their business is creating encryption software, so I trust it. Yeah, and that last bullet point is Kingston is in the business of building flash drives, not doing data encryption. So I don't really know if they've got any experts that really understand this stuff. I assume they do, but I trust VeraCrypt more. And again, you pay a premium for this. VeraCrypt is free. I can go buy a $10 flash drive and I'm all set to go with encryption. Whereas here you have to pay a lot of money for this. The price of these flash drives goes up about $250 as they get bigger. So I'd just rather use VeraCrypt. The last thing I'm going to talk about is whole drive encryption. And I have a story to go with that. So what does whole drive encryption do? Whole drive encryption, as the name implies, encrypts the entire contents of your hard drive. And the idea is that it's going to completely prevent anybody from accessing any data on your laptop without a password. And I want to tell you a quick story of how I got started with this. So I agreed to meet a friend of mine at a Subway. This is not that particular Subway, but it looked just like this. So I agreed to meet him for dinner, and we had a lovely dinner. I had my laptop with me, and in the blazing Florida sun, I did not want to leave it in the car. So I grabbed it and I had it sitting on the bench next to me. And we were talking, we had a great time. We were there for about 2 hours. And as it started to get dark, we were still engaged in conversation. We got up and left, and I did not realize I didn't have my laptop. I did not grab the laptop. It was still sitting on the bench right where I'd left it. And I got in my car and drove off. And about 2.5 hours later, I realized that I didn't have my bag anymore. I tried to call Subway. I couldn't get anybody on the phone. And I just headed down to the Subway. And the front of it looked just like this. We were sitting at one of those tables, and there were people passing by all the time. And by the time I got back there, it was about 3 hours later. And I thought, that's it. My laptop's going to be gone. Well, nobody was more surprised than me that when I got back there, my laptop was untouched right where I'd left it. It was still sitting on the bench and nobody had touched it. So no harm done, but I got to thinking about it and I thought, I don't think there's any patient information on that laptop, but I don't know that for sure. And if that laptop had gotten taken, we would have to go through the whole business of notifying the patients that their information might have been compromised, because I couldn't remember for sure if I had left any files on the laptop. So that really got me worried about losing my laptop. So it turns out VeraCrypt can help me there too. So what VeraCrypt allows you to do is encrypt your entire hard drive. And it's really easy. Let me show you how. So I'm going to run VeraCrypt, and all I have to do is install it on my laptop, go up to System, and the very first item there is Encrypt System Partition or Drive. And I click there. Yeah. I've already done it. It's not going to let me do it again. So it would, if I hadn't already done it, it would prompt me for a password. And then it would encrypt my hard drive, which, by the way, takes many hours to do. But you can go ahead and use your laptop while it's doing it, but you just can't shut it off until it's done. So once you've done that, then now on my laptop, because I have done it now, every time I start my computer, I get the Dell logo just as I normally would. But up in the upper left-hand corner, and you may not be able to read it, it's prompting me for a password. And I have to enter the password before it will start Windows. And if I don't know the password, it just won't start. And even if somebody gets my laptop and opens it up, gets the hard drive out, and tries to read the hard drive in another computer, they'll find everything's encrypted. They can't get at anything. So I now know for certain that if I lose my laptop, I don't have to, I have to replace the laptop, and I don't want to have to do that. But at least I don't have to worry that somebody's going to be able to start the laptop up and get any kind of information off of it. So an obvious question that people ask is, how safe is this? So you said, okay, well, your laptop's encrypted. Do you have to worry about somebody being able to break the encryption? Or if I use VeraCrypt to create an encrypted container, do I have to worry about somebody being able to break into that container? Or if I use AES-Crypt to encrypt a file, do I have to worry about somebody being able to break into that file? Well, the answer is this stuff is uncrackable by any known technology. Now, there's a couple of caveats with that, but the general answer is no. If you use a good password when you do the encryption, then nobody is going to be able to get into it. There's speculation that the National Security Agency or the CIA or some of those guys, if they really want in badly enough, They can use their supercomputers to break into it, and it may take them weeks or months to do it, but eventually they get in. But with my patient records, I'm not worried about that. The NSA is not going to spend millions of dollars to break into the patient records. In general, I'm worried about somebody finding the laptop and just rummaging around in it. Not going to happen. The key is to use a good password. In all the examples here, I just used password, and you obviously wouldn't want to use that. Use some nice, long, complex password, but as long as you do that, you'll be fine. And most importantly, don't lose the password. There's no backdoor into any of this stuff. If you create an encrypted container, for example, or if you encrypt your laptop's hard drive and you lose the password, you will never see any of that data again. There is no way to get into it without the password. Now, if you've encrypted your entire hard drive and you lose your password, you can always reformat the hard drive, reinstall Windows, and start all over again, but you'll never be able to get at the data that was on that laptop. And remember to do backups just like anything else. Just because it's safe from prying eyes doesn't mean that you can't lose it. You could still have a hard drive failure. If your laptop gets lost, there went your data. Nobody else can see it, but now you don't have it either. So be sure you do backups just like you should on anything else. So there's one other product I want to talk about. And it's Microsoft BitLocker. So some versions of Windows come with encryption software built in that can encrypt your hard drive, and Microsoft's solution for that is called BitLocker. If you look through some of the settings on your Windows laptop, you may see BitLocker referenced. So on one of my laptops, at least, I have BitLocker, and that would have been an option, but I actually like VeraCrypt better. So here's a comparison between the two products. So VeraCrypt is produced by a company called Idrix, and BitLocker comes from Microsoft. The problem is VeraCrypt is available in more places than BitLocker. So VeraCrypt's available for any version of Windows, for Mac, or for Linux, whereas BitLocker is only available on Windows Pro or Windows Enterprise. So on one of my laptops, this one, I've only got Windows Home, BitLocker's not on it. And I can't get BitLocker for it without upgrading to Pro. So I like the fact that VeraCrypt's available on any computer I've got. VeraCrypt never comes pre-installed, whereas BitLocker will if you've got Windows Pro. So you have to install it, but that's a minor thing for me. VeraCrypt is open source, and BitLocker is proprietary Microsoft code. That's not a huge factor one way or another for me, but I like the idea that VeraCrypt's been audited by other people and they've looked at the software and it's been audited and it's safe. The one thing BitLocker has going for it is companies really like it because it can be managed by their IT staff. So with VeraCrypt, if you have a laptop that's encrypted with VeraCrypt and the person loses their password, then again, all you can do is just reformat it and start all over. You can't get at any of the data. You'll never get into it without reinstalling Windows. Whereas with BitLocker, if a company's got a bunch of laptops and somebody can't get into it because they've lost some BitLocker credential, the corporate IT department can get into it. So for large companies especially, that's a little bit of a advantage.
Question.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you have, if you purchase Microsoft and it has BitLocker on it, do you have to uninstall it somehow to install VeraCrypt?
You don't have to, but you can't uninstall it, I don't think. But in the Windows settings, there's a place under security, there's a place to turn it off. And that's the thing to do. So
good to know. Good
yeah,
to know.
If you've got BitLocker, then you should, and you want to use VeraCrypt, then you should turn it off. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about is phones. Because many people keep a lot of really sensitive information on their phones. And if some people, if they lost their phones, the person that found the phone could theoretically get at some really personal information. So I want to talk about that real quickly. Almost every phone these days allows you to do what's called whole phone encryption, where all the storage on the phone is encrypted. And when you start the phone up, you have to enter a PIN. And without the PIN, you're not going to be able to get at any of the data on the phone. And I have an Android phone. This is a screenshot from my phone. And in the settings, there's an option if I want to encrypt the phone or not, and I have it turned on that I do. The real problem with this is that the encryption's really only as good as your password. And what most people use for the password is just a 4-digit number, a 4-digit PIN. And the problem is that if somebody wanted into this badly enough, they could just start guessing pins, and given enough time, they could perhaps guess your PIN, especially since most people use something like a birthday or their kids' ages or something like that for their PIN. So, you know, the encryption would be great if people use nice long 20-character PINs, but they don't. They tend to use really short PINs. So that's a little bit of a concern. There are apps that allow you to store information on your phone encrypted separately from the phone's encryption. And one of the ones that I have used and really like is called Color Note. And Color Note is just a general way to store information on your phone that you want to be able to get at. So you can see here, this is a screenshot of somebody that was using it to store their business plan and and some reminders and contacts and a shopping list and a list of books and so on. And so it's just a way to store information on your phone. But if you look at business plan, you'll notice there's a little padlock next to it. And what that indicates is they told Color Note that they want this encrypted. So when they did that, Color Note prompted them for a password. They entered a password. And now to be able to see that note in Color Note, you have to enter the password. So it's a way to store a particular piece of information on your phone that's a little more secure, a little safer, has an additional level of security above and beyond the fact that the phone itself is encrypted. Another way to do this, and this is what I actually do, is I love Microsoft OneNote, and it also is just a general note-taking app, and I have it on my phone. But one of the things Microsoft OneNote enables you to do is to take a section of notes and encrypt that whole section. So you can create a section in a notebook called private phone data, and you can tell it to encrypt that section, and then anything you put in that section is going to be encrypted. And again, it just allows you to use a more sophisticated password, have another level of encryption above and beyond what the phone actually provides. And OneNote is free. So as a matter of fact, everything we've looked at in this presentation is free. So there's some links of where to get the software that we've talked about in this presentation, and it's pretty much just the name of the product with .com on it. The exception to that is Veracrypt. Veracrypt, the company that created it, Idris, is actually a French company. So the address to get at Veracrypt is veracrypt.fr for France. And that's all I've got. So hope you found something in here that you can use. There's my email address. Feel free to use it anytime. If you've got any questions, if you want to try some of these things and you get stuck, just send me an email and I'll help you through them. Any questions?
Yeah, I had one question. What's the overhead for encrypting and decrypting when you're running Veracrypt? Like if you wanted to store like secure surveillance videos in a container and play them back, is there a noticeable degradation in performance?
I have a funny story there. So to make a short answer long, you will never notice any kind of lag. So VeraCrypt uses something that all of these products I showed you use something called AES encryption. And AES was specifically designed to be fast. So, and to be able to be done in hardware, by the way. So a lot of computers actually have hardware support for this stuff. You will never notice it. The product that VeraCrypt is based on was called TrueCrypt. And you ever heard of a guy named Steve Gibson? He's a security expert, widely known in the security industry. He was worried about the same thing. And so he decided to do a test. So he created a laptop that did not have encryption. And then he created an identical laptop or purchased an identical laptop and put whole disk encryption on it using TrueCrypt, which is essentially the same code as VeraCrypt, and was shocked to find out that the TrueCrypt laptop was faster. And the reason it was faster is because the people who had designed TrueCrypt had written their own disk drivers that were more efficient than what Microsoft was shipping with Windows.
Nice.
Now, I doubt that's true anymore. But the point is, the overhead in this is so light that you will never notice it.
Yeah, so one thing I did want to mention based on some feedback I was hearing when we were on mute in here during the presentation is that, that entering the password before you log into Windows for, whole disk encryption, it's more than just double passwords. So if you take a default Windows installation on a laptop that's not encrypted today, someone has a Linux boot drive, boot stick, they can plug it in there, log in with Linux, they can access your files even if they don't have your password. With this method, all your files are encrypted. Someone could boot your machine from Linux. Someone could take the drive out of your machine, put it in another machine. And unlike a default Windows installation, they won't be able to see your files without the password.
Yeah, and I appreciate that clarification. That's exactly it. So it prevents anybody from pulling. It's more than just not being able to start Windows and run the computer. If somebody pulls the hard drive and uses every technique we know of to try to get at the data, if it's whole disk encryption, they will not be able to get at anything on that drive.
So he wasn't been able to do that. Yes.
Anything else?
I say, and that includes our repair help guys. So if you total encrypt your hard drive and you can't remember your password, don't come to us because there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah, that's right.
If you encrypt that whole hard drive, can you reformat it?
Yeah, and if you reformat it, you can reinstall Windows on it or whatever. So if you, let's say somebody gives you a laptop that's got whole drive encryption on it, you can just re-encrypt it. You can just reformat it, install Windows, and it's fine. So it's still usable. It's just that you're not going to be able to get at anything that was on it previously.
Yeah, you start from square one.
Yep.
Mark, do you think it's okay if I have to send a password that I use a different email address that I'm using to send the file to send the password?
So I'm a big proponent of not using the same method, even a variation like that. Because imagine that somebody has put a screen grabber on your computer or tapped your internet connection or something like that, then they still might be able to intercept both of those. Now, if you use some sort of secure email, then and you and I have talked about that before, John. I know that you do. Then it's probably okay. But if you're using secure email, then you don't need to encrypt it. You don't need to encrypt the file anyway. That's the whole point of secure email, right? So, so I would not. I don't think there's anything. I think the best thing you can do is call the person and say, John, I'm going to send you a file. Let me give you the password. And that's just the safest thing to do.
They'd have to really be on top of it.
Unless it's a deep fake AI, pretending it's you on the phone.
Yeah, I don't know what to do about that.
Are there any other questions? Well, Mark,
I would say when I saw this, I wanted everybody to see it because of how easy, especially with the AES and the VeraCrypt, how easy it is to do that and set it up so that if you do have to transport critical information, it's not a big technical thing to do, especially with just using AES, because just right click and out. So I wanted everybody to see how easy it was to do that.
Yeah, and the big place I run into this, I lose flash drives all the time. I buy the cheapest flash drives I can find because I'm always losing them. And if I didn't know that VeraCrypt allowed me to create the encrypted containers on the flash drives, I'd be terrified that every time I lost a flash drive, somebody else was going to get the information off of it. So it's really a godsend.
hey, there was one other question I heard here. How does VeraCrypt make money if the software is free?
Oh, that's interesting. So Idris does a lot. They do computer consulting. That's their real line of business. And what happened with them was when TrueCrypt went out of business, the code was open source, so they could still get at the code. But when TrueCrypt went out of business, they had the issue that they were depending on it for their consulting business. And so they took the code, they rewrote some of it, they beefed it up quite a bit. They had it audited to prove that it was secure. And so they intended to use it for their own use, but as long as they've done all that work, why not stick it up on their website? And it just brings them a little bit of, notice that they otherwise wouldn't have. So, for just posting it on their website, millions of people know about it that otherwise never would have heard of them. So
Yeah.
It's not their primary.
The great thing about consulting, et cetera. Yeah. So the great thing about having it open source is you have many, many, many times the number of eyes on the code. So if somebody finds a bug, they can report it. Whereas if it wasn't open source, then they would only have their own developers looking at the code. So that's definitely a good reason for open source too. So.
Yeah, and they actually had an audit, a formal audit to prove that it was secure. So I have a lot of faith in VeraCrypt that it's secure.
I've got a question about the encryption and like a Dropbox folder and so forth. Can you use it for Dropbox folders?
Yeah, so if I remember correctly, and I use Dropbox for a few things. I'm not a big Dropbox user. The Dropbox traffic is installed as the data travels from your computer to Dropbox's servers, it's encrypted. But on Dropbox's servers, it's not encrypted, except maybe if you pay for the pro version, it is. But there is still the risk, as I understand it, and if I'm doing them a disservice, I'm sorry, I'm not 100% sure of this. There's still the risk that if Dropbox got hacked, somebody could get at that information. So, and the reason I think I'm correct about this is I've seen a lot of people that have actually used VeraCrypt to create encrypted containers in Dropbox because they were worried about Dropbox keeping the information secure.
That's what I'm wondering, if you could use it within Dropbox, because you usually have the Dropbox folder on your computer and it syncs up with the cloud Dropbox. So you can get to it from any computer in the world or whatever. So I was just wondering if it was encrypted on your computer, is it going to be encrypted on their server?
Yeah, so I think my belief is that at least for the free version, they do not keep the data encrypted on their servers, but I'm not completely sure of that. I will tell you that if you're really concerned about the security of your data, there are several companies that provide Dropbox-like services. There's one called pCloud, and I think Proton now does it, where they really are focused on cloud storage that is secure. And I don't know that Dropbox really has that focus.
Any other questions online or in the room? Well, Mark, we definitely appreciate you lending your expertise and your time to the group. I think we all learned something here. I know I did. I'd never heard of Veracrypt before, so that's looks like a very easy to use and valuable way to harden your data.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Open source and cross-platform, two big things for me.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Be like John with his dice there, taking the gamble every time you save your data, right?
Yeah, and by the way, I've used the Linux version and I know that it works. So
Is the UI pretty much the same, the interface and everything the same?
yeah, and there is a command line version as well, because we us Linux people really like the command line, so you can actually use Veracrypt just in the command line.
Nice. All right. So I think unless anyone had any announcements, the next point of business is we don't record the raffle, right? Or we do record the raffle.
No,
Dave doesn't want to be recorded when he's doing the raffle, so we're gonna go ahead and end the meeting, please, Everett.
I will make mention that next month, we have another excellent program on internet security, with the theme being that internet security is not just for seniors. So even though most of us are seniors and it'll apply to us, but this is a meeting where we want to have a lot of people, a lot of ages, because internet security isn't just for seniors. We have a lot of juniors that are getting trapped with that. So the presenter is Uwe Detweiler, I think is the name, and he does an excellent presentation on that. And I do also want to mention to the people who are here that next Friday is our first Windows how-to that we're going to do on the first and third Friday afternoons. This focus this week will be on Zoom for those people who need to learn how to do Zoom. Bring your laptops in. We will get it installed, get you connected, get you a trial run. People who already know about Zoom and want to learn more about Zoom, you could come in, or I'll send out the link that you can jump on after we get everything going at the workshop and take part that way. So we'll have a Zoom meeting that will be teaching Zoom.